Break free now. Self-doubt is stealing your destiny. Rewire your mind, shatter your limits, and claim the life you deserve before it's too late. Eliminate self-doubt. Break free from your limiting beliefs and rewire your thoughts. Written by Dorian Vexler and published by Listen, Grow Sleep. Before we dive in, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely love the books I publish here. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always so cool to see where people are watching from. Now listen, grow, and hopefully you fall asleep. Chapter 1. The Invisible Prison We Build. My name is Dr. Dorian Vexler, and for the past 15 years, I've been fascinated by a simple yet profound question. Why do brilliant people sabotage themselves? I've worked with CEOs who freeze up before important presentations, despite having built million-dollar companies. I've counseled artists with extraordinary talent who never share their work because they're convinced it's not good enough. I've watched entrepreneurs with game-changing ideas talk themselves out of pursuing them before they even begin. What I've discovered is that intelligence, talent, and opportunity are rarely the limiting factors in our success. The real barrier is something far more insidious, the invisible prison of self-doubt that we construct in our own minds. Think about it for a moment. We live in an era of unprecedented opportunity. Never before in human history have so many resources been available to so many people. We have access to information, education, and tools that previous generations could only dream of. Yet despite all these advantages, many of us find ourselves stuck in patterns of mediocrity, unable to break through what feels like an invisible ceiling above our heads. Why is this happening? Why do intelligent people procrastinate on their most important goals? Why do motivated individuals find ways to sabotage their own success? And why do so many of us, despite learning new skills and discovering new opportunities, keep earning the same amount of money and achieving the same level of success, as if we're trapped in some kind of invisible box? The answer isn't lack of resources or opportunity. I've seen people with virtually no advantages create extraordinary results, while others with every possible advantage struggle to make progress. Consider people like Colonel Sanders, who was broke at 65 before starting KFC, or Oprah Winfrey, who overcame poverty and abuse to become one of the most influential people in the world. Think about Helen Keller, who achieved greatness despite being deaf and blind, or Albert Einstein, who dropped out of school at 15 and failed his entrance exam to the Zurich Polytechnic. These examples teach us something crucial. Success isn't determined by external circumstances. It's determined by something much deeper, something that happens inside our minds. As human beings, we have a nervous system that's hardwired for comfort and safety. This system served our ancestors well when survival was the primary concern. But we also have something else, something that some would call our soul or our essence, that's hardwired for growth and expansion. The tension between these two forces creates the frustration that keeps so many people trapped on what I call the hamster wheel of mediocrity. Our brains are remarkable organs, but they come with some built-in challenges that we need to understand if we want to overcome self-doubt. The crowning achievement of human evolution is the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain that's responsible for executive decision-making, critical thinking, and conscious choice. This is the part of our brain that operates at higher frequencies and allows us to rise above our circumstances. But here's the catch. This sophisticated part of our brain doesn't fully come online until we're about 7 years old. Before that age, children operate primarily in what neuroscientists call theta and delta brainwave states. This is why babies sleep so much, and why young children live in that magical fantasy world where anything seems possible. They haven't yet developed the critical thinking abilities that would question their limitless imagination. This developmental fact has profound implications for our adult lives. During those first 7 years, when our critical thinking abilities are offline, we're incredibly impressionable. We absorb everything around us like sponges, forming beliefs about ourselves and the world that will influence us for the rest of our lives. Aristotle understood this when he said, "Give me the child for 7 years, and I'll give you the man." What he was recognizing is that our fundamental beliefs about ourselves are formed during this critical period, often without our conscious awareness or consent. Let me give you an example of how this works. Imagine a father taking his young son, let's call him David, to the grocery store. Dad is stressed about money, worried about his job security, and still upset from an argument with his wife that morning. He's dealing with adult problems that feel overwhelming, and the last thing he wants is any additional complications. When they get to the checkout line, David sees the toys strategically placed at his eye level. Like any child, he gets excited and asks, "Daddy, can I have a toy?" Dad, lost in his own worries, initially says no. But David, being a persistent child, keeps asking, "Please, Daddy, can I have just one toy?" Finally, Dad snaps. In his frustration and stress, he says something he'll probably forget within minutes. "No, you can't have a toy. You don't deserve it. You're not good enough, and you haven't been well behaved today." Dad thinks this will end the conversation so he can get back to dealing with his adult concerns. But something significant has just happened. David doesn't understand that his father is stressed about money or work or relationships. All David hears is a message that gets burned into his developing brain. "I'm not good enough. I don't deserve good things." This single moment, repeated in various forms throughout childhood, creates what I call a core limiting belief. David will likely spend much of his adult life unconsciously acting out behaviors that confirm this belief, including sabotaging opportunities for success that would challenge his deep-seated conviction that he's not good enough. This is how self-doubt is born. It's not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's a natural result of how our brains develop and how we interpret the world around us during our most formative years. The tragedy is that these beliefs, formed when we were too young to question them, continue to run our lives decades later. They operate like invisible software programs, influencing our decisions, our actions, and our results, often without our conscious awareness. But here's the good news. Once we understand how these patterns were created, we can learn to change them. The same brain that learned to doubt itself can learn to believe in itself. The same mind that created limitations can create possibilities. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore exactly how to do this. We'll uncover the specific mechanisms that keep us trapped in cycles of self-doubt. And more importantly, we'll learn practical strategies for breaking free and rewiring our thoughts for success. Your journey to eliminate self-doubt begins with understanding that you're not broken, you're not flawed, and you're not destined to remain stuck. You're simply operating with outdated programming that no longer serves you. And just like any software, that programming can be updated. Chapter 2: The Architecture of Self-Sabotage. After working with thousands of clients over the years, I've discovered what I call the undisputed first law of personal transformation. People will never rise above the opinion they have of themselves. This might seem obvious at first, but the implications are profound. That opinion of ourselves, that internal self-image, is largely formed during our childhood years, before age 7, based on our perception of whether we received love and approval from the people we most wanted it from. I usually let people sit with that realization for a while because it explains so much about why we struggle as adults. The child who felt unloved or unworthy doesn't simply grow out of those feelings. Instead, that child becomes an adult who unconsciously seeks evidence to confirm those early beliefs, even when it means sabotaging their own success. This principle mirrors what I consider the first law of relationships. No one can love us more than we love ourselves. When our self-worth is low, we either push away people who treat us well because we don't believe we deserve it, or we attract people who treat us poorly because it feels familiar and confirms our negative self-image. But there's another layer to this puzzle that makes breaking free from self-doubt even more challenging. We are creatures of habit. And understanding how habits work is crucial to understanding why we sabotage ourselves. Your prefrontal cortex, that sophisticated part of your brain responsible for conscious decision-making, is prime real estate. Despite weighing only about 2% of your total body weight, your brain consumes roughly 20% of all the calories you burn each day. The prefrontal cortex, being the most energy-intensive part of your brain, is expensive to operate. So evolution develops some shortcuts. When you make a decision using your conscious mind, your brain assumes it's a good decision because you used intelligence to make it. Whether you choose the salad or the French fries, your brain doesn't judge the quality of the choice. Its job is simply to adapt and make your life more efficient. If you make the same choice repeatedly, your brain says, this person keeps choosing French fries, so rather than waste energy on conscious decision-making every time, I'll hand this over to the midbrain and make it automatic. Before you know it, you're ordering French fries without even thinking about it. It's just what you do. This automation can be incredibly useful. It's why you don't have to consciously think about how to walk or drive a familiar route. But it also creates some challenges. You might find yourself arriving at work on your day off, wondering how you got there. Or you might drive home and realize you don't remember the last few miles of the journey. Your midbrain was running the show while your conscious mind was elsewhere. The deeper challenge is that we're only using our conscious, critical thinking brain about 5% of the time. The other 95% of the time, we're what I call sleeping awake, operating on autopilot based on unconscious patterns and beliefs. Let me give you an analogy that illustrates this dynamic. Imagine your conscious mind is like an ant. This ant is industrious, hardworking, and determined. In fact, this particular ant went to a personal development seminar last week, set some goals, and is now marching confidently north toward its achievements. The problem is, this ant is marching across the back of an elephant that's heading south. The elephant represents your unconscious mind, carrying all your limiting beliefs, unresolved emotional issues, and automatic patterns. No matter how determined the ant is, no matter how clear its goals, or how strong its willpower, the elephant is going to determine the ultimate direction. This is why willpower alone isn't enough to create lasting change. This is why you can set goals and make resolutions and attend seminars, but still find yourself stuck in the same patterns. The ant of your conscious mind is no match for the elephant of your unconscious programming. So how do we get the elephant moving in the right direction? How do we align our unconscious patterns with our conscious goals? Think of your mind like a compass needle. It can only point in one direction at a time, but when you're operating from that 5% conscious awareness, you can grab that compass needle and point it anywhere you want. If you're feeling down, you can choose to watch a comedy or call a friend who makes you laugh. If you're feeling low on energy, you can choose to exercise or have a healthy snack. But 95% of the time, you're not consciously directing that compass needle. And when you let go of it, it will always drift back to its default magnetic north. Unfortunately, for most people, that default setting is more negative than positive. This brings us to the third major challenge in overcoming self-doubt, and it's something you might want to tattoo on the inside of your eyelids. Environment trumps willpower. What I mean by this is that your environment will always beat your intentions over time. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're not a fan of jazz music. You prefer rock or country or pop. But your car breaks down this week, and your neighbor, who works at the same place you do, offers to give you rides. The only catch is that they love jazz and play it during the entire 45-minute commute. I don't care what you think consciously about jazz music. Within 3 days, you'll be tapping your foot to the beat. Within 5 days, you'll be humming jazz melodies in the shower. We don't get to choose whether we get programmed. We're programmable by design. We can only choose how we want to be programmed. You can have all the intention in the world to stay positive and motivated, but if you're constantly surrounded by negative influences, the environment will win over time. You can read positive affirmations and practice visualization, but if you live with someone who constantly criticizes you and reminds you of your limitations, eventually you'll start to believe them. This is the law of conformity in action. If you hang out with 9 people who complain constantly, you'll likely become the 10th complainer. If you hang out with 9 people who see possibilities instead of problems, who support each other's dreams instead of tearing them down, you'll likely become the 10th positive person. Or you'll leave that environment because it no longer matches your internal programming. Understanding these three principles, the opinion we have of ourselves, our nature as creatures of habit, and the power of environment over willpower, gives us a roadmap for eliminating self-doubt. We need to address all three levels: changing our self-image, creating new habits that support our goals, and designing an environment that reinforces positive change. The good news is that once you understand how these mechanisms work, you can use them to your advantage. The same brain that learned limiting beliefs can learn empowering ones. The same mind that created self-doubt can create self-confidence. The same patterns that led to self-sabotage can be rewired to support your success. In our next chapter, we'll explore specific strategies for making these changes, starting with the foundation of all transformation, taking control of what you put into your mind. Chapter 3. Reprogramming your mental software. Now that we understand how self-doubt is created and maintained, let's talk about how to eliminate it. I'm going to share 3 fundamental strategies that will help you rewire your thoughts and break free from limiting beliefs. These aren't complex theories, they're practical tools that you can start using immediately. The first strategy is simple but powerful. Stop putting the wrong things into your mind. Remember, we are adapting machines. Our bodies adapt to whatever environment we put them in, whether that's the gym or a fast food restaurant. Our bodies don't have preferences, their job is simply to adapt. The same is true for our minds. Whatever we consistently expose our minds to becomes our mental environment, and our thoughts and beliefs adapt accordingly. The 2 biggest influences on our unconscious programming are the mainstream media and our peer group. Let's start with the media. If you still believe that the mainstream media exists to inform you about what's happening in the world, I have news for you. You're living in a fantasy. The job of mainstream media isn't to report news. It's to capture your attention so they can sell it to advertisers. Media companies understand that our brains are evolutionarily wired to notice negative information before positive information. This is because our ancestors needed to spot threats quickly to survive. The media exploits this by constantly feeding us stories designed to trigger our amygdala, the part of our brain responsible for fear and anxiety. They're not trying to help you become a better person or live a happier life. They're trying to hook your attention out of the crowd so they can record you as a viewing statistic and justify their advertising rates. The media is a business, not a charity. I haven't watched a news report or read a newspaper in over 15 years. People often ask me, but how do you know what's going on in the world? My response is, everything is going on in the world. The real question is, what do you want to choose to focus on? Think of the world like a vast forest at night. Everything is happening simultaneously, but the media wants to take your flashlight and point it at the snake eating the rat, while ignoring the beautiful bird being born just a few feet away. It's a choice about where you direct your attention. You cannot consume negative media and maintain a positive mindset. It's like saying you want to be healthy while smoking cigarettes. You can go to the gym every day, but if you're smoking, you can't be truly healthy. It's a binary equation. If you're programming yourself with constant negativity from the media, you can't expect your default mental state to be positive. I have no idea what's happening in the world at large, but I have complete clarity about what's happening in my world. And if something is truly important, it will find its way to me through other channels. The second major influence on our programming is our peer group. Some people say, I could probably change my friends, but I can't change my family. My brother is the most negative person I know. My mother-in-law constantly tells me I'm not good enough. While it's true that we can't change our family members, we can change how much influence we allow them to have over our mental state. The best advice I can give is this. Love your family, but choose your friends carefully. You have more control over your environment than you might think. You can limit your exposure to negative family members. You can choose not to engage in conversations that drain your energy. You can set boundaries that protect your mental space. The second strategy is start putting the right things into your mind. We live in an incredible time where positive, empowering information is more accessible than ever before. Whether it's podcasts, audiobooks, inspirational interviews, or biographies of people who've overcome tremendous obstacles, you have unlimited access to content that can reprogram your mind for success. Every single day, or at least every week, You should be exposing yourself to information that supports your potential and reminds you of what's possible. There's no excuse for not doing this in our current society, but if you're not consciously choosing what to put into your mind, you'll be programmed by default with whatever happens to be around you. If you don't start starring in the movie of your own life, you'll end up as an extra in someone else's movie. The choice is yours, but you have to make it consciously and consistently. I recommend creating what I call a mental diet. Just as you might plan your meals to nourish your body, plan your mental consumption to nourish your mind. Start your day with something positive. Listen to inspiring content during your commute. Read books that expand your thinking before bed. Replace the time you used to spend consuming negative media with content that builds you up instead of tearing you down. Replace conversations about problems with conversations about possibilities. Replace entertainment that leaves you feeling empty with entertainment that leaves you feeling inspired. The third strategy is get the things that shouldn't be there out. This is where working with a qualified mentor, coach, or therapist becomes invaluable. You need someone who understands how to navigate the complex landscape of human psychology. Someone who can help you identify and eliminate the unconscious patterns that are sabotaging your success. Let me give you an example. I once worked with a client named Michael who came to me saying he needed help with time management. A typical coach might have taught him some organizational skills and scheduling techniques. But within minutes of our conversation, it became clear that time management wasn't his real problem. Michael's real issue was his inability to say no to people. He was terrified of rejection, so he said yes to every request, every invitation, every opportunity that came his way. His calendar was completely overbooked, not because he couldn't manage time, but because he couldn't manage boundaries. We spent our sessions working on his fear of rejection, helping him understand where it came from and developing strategies for setting healthy boundaries. Once he addressed the root cause, his time management problems disappeared naturally. This is why surface-level solutions often fail. If you're trying to build confidence by repeating affirmations, but you have deep-seated beliefs about being unworthy, the affirmations will feel hollow and ineffective. You need to address the underlying programming first. Working with someone skilled in identifying and changing unconscious patterns can save you years of struggle. They can help you see blind spots that you can't see yourself and guide you through the process of rewiring your mental software safely and effectively. When you start implementing these three strategies, stopping negative input, increasing positive input, and removing limiting programming, you begin to take control of that compass needle we talked about earlier. Instead of letting it drift back to a negative default setting 95% of the time, you start to consciously redirect it toward thoughts and beliefs that support your goals and dreams. This is the beginning of what I call self-mastery. Before you spend money on more skills training or business opportunities, invest in mastering yourself. Throughout human history, virtually everyone who achieved greatness emphasized the importance of self-mastery as the foundation for all other success. When you master yourself, you develop the ability to walk into a room where everything is descending into chaos and maintain your center. When everything is breaking down around you, you become the eye of the storm, the person others look to for stability and leadership. Self-mastery gives you the best chance of becoming the greatest version of yourself. And when you become that person, you naturally become an example and an invitation to others. Not an imposition, because nobody changes because you tell them to. People change because they're inspired to change, and you can only inspire them by being the example of what's possible. This is how you make a real difference in the world. Not by trying to fix everyone else, but by fixing yourself first. As Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Your journey to eliminate self-doubt starts with taking responsibility for your mental environment. It continues with the daily practice of feeding your mind with positive, empowering content. And it accelerates when you get professional help to identify and remove the unconscious patterns that have been holding you back. The prison of self-doubt that has confined you isn't real. It's made of thoughts and beliefs that can be changed. The key to your freedom is in your hands. The question is, are you ready to use it? Chapter 4, The Stories We Tell Ourselves. There's something I need to tell you about the human mind that might surprise you. We are natural storytellers. Every single day, from the moment we wake up until we fall asleep, we're constantly creating narratives about ourselves, our circumstances, and our possibilities. The problem is, most of us are terrible editors. I learned this lesson in a profound way through a client I'll call Rebecca. She was a brilliant software engineer who had been passed over for promotion 3 times in 2 years. When she came to me, she was convinced that her company was discriminatory, that her boss didn't like her, and that she was destined to remain stuck in her current position forever. Dr. Dorian Vexler, she said during our first session, I've tried everything. I work harder than anyone else on my team. I stay late, I volunteer for extra projects, I even brought donuts to the office every Friday for 6 months. Nothing works. They just don't want to promote women in tech. Now, discrimination in tech is a real issue, and I wasn't about to dismiss her concerns. But as we dug deeper into her story, something interesting emerged. Rebecca had been telling herself a very specific narrative about what it meant to be worthy of promotion. In her mind, worthiness was directly tied to how much she suffered, how many hours she worked, and how much she sacrificed. This belief system had its roots in her childhood. Rebecca grew up in a household where her mother worked 3 jobs to support the family after her father left. Her mother's constant refrain was, "Nothing good comes easy, Rebecca. You have to work twice as hard as everyone else to get half as much." While her mother's work ethic was admirable, the underlying message Rebecca internalized was problematic. I am only valuable when I'm struggling. If something comes easily to me, it means I don't deserve it. So Rebecca had unconsciously created a work style that emphasized struggle over results. She stayed late not because her projects required it, but because leaving on time felt like she wasn't working hard enough. She volunteered for extra projects, not because they aligned with her career goals, but because saying no felt selfish. She brought donuts not because she wanted to build relationships, but because she felt she needed to prove her worth through service. Meanwhile, her colleagues who got promoted were telling themselves very different stories. They focused on impact rather than hours. They said no to projects that didn't advance their goals. They built strategic relationships rather than trying to please everyone. They operated from a belief that their skills and contributions were inherently valuable. The fascinating thing about stories is that they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Rebecca's story that I have to work twice as hard to get half as much created behaviors that actually made advancement more difficult. Her managers saw someone who was always busy, but not necessarily strategic, someone who said yes to everything, but didn't seem to have clear priorities. When we started working together, I didn't try to convince Rebecca that her story was wrong. Instead, I helped her become aware that it was just one possible story among many. We explored questions like, what if your value isn't determined by how much you struggle? What if working smarter is more important than working harder? What if your skills are already enough, and you just need to showcase them differently? This process of examining and rewriting our internal narratives is what I call story archaeology. We dig beneath the surface of our current beliefs to uncover the original experiences that shaped them. Then we ask ourselves, is this story still serving me? Does it help me create the life I want? Or is it time to write a new chapter? The stories we tell ourselves fall into several categories, and understanding these categories can help you identify which narratives might be limiting your potential. First, there are origin stories. These are the narratives we create about where we come from and what that means about our possibilities. I come from a poor family, so I'll never be wealthy. I'm not naturally smart, so I can't succeed in business. People like me don't get opportunities like that. Origin stories can be empowering or limiting, depending on how we frame them. The same background that one person uses as evidence of limitation, another person uses as evidence of resilience and determination. Oprah Winfrey could have told herself a story about being destined for poverty and abuse. Instead, she created a narrative about overcoming obstacles and helping others do the same. Second, there are capability stories. These are the narratives we create about our skills, talents, and potential. I'm not a math person. I'm not creative. I'm not a leader. I'm not good with technology. The dangerous thing about capability stories is that they often become true through our actions. If you believe you're not creative, you'll avoid creative challenges, which means you won't develop creative skills, which confirms your belief that you're not creative. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. I once worked with a client named James who insisted he was not a people person. He'd built his entire career around this belief, choosing roles that minimized human interaction. But when his company restructured and he was forced into a management position, something interesting happened. With proper training and support, James discovered he was actually quite good at understanding and motivating people. His not a people person story had been based on a few awkward social experiences in high school, not on any real assessment of his adult capabilities. Third, there are worthiness stories. These are perhaps the most damaging narratives we carry. I don't deserve success. Good things don't happen to people like me. If I get too successful, people will think I'm arrogant. I'm not worthy of love unless I'm perfect. Worthiness stories often masquerade as humility or realism, but they're actually forms of self-sabotage. They create internal resistance to success, causing us to unconsciously undermine our own efforts whenever we start to achieve something significant. Rebecca's story about needing to work twice as hard was actually a worthiness story in disguise. The underlying belief was that her natural talents and contributions weren't enough to merit advancement. She had to earn her worth through suffering and sacrifice. Fourth, there are possibility stories. These narratives define what we believe is possible for our lives. People in my industry don't make that kind of money. I'm too old to start over. The economy is too uncertain to take risks. All the good opportunities are taken. Possibility stories are particularly insidious because they often contain grains of truth. Yes, some industries pay less than others. Yes, starting over at 50 is different from starting over at 25. Yes, the economy has uncertainties. But these partial truths become complete limitations when we use them to justify not trying. The key to rewriting limiting stories is not to replace them with unrealistic fantasies, but to create more empowering and accurate narratives based on a fuller picture of reality. For example, instead of, "I'm too old to start over," you might tell yourself, "I have decades of experience and wisdom that give me advantages younger people don't have." Many successful entrepreneurs started their most successful ventures after age 40. Instead of, "I'm not naturally smart," you might say, "Intelligence comes in many forms, and I can develop the specific types of intelligence I need for my goals." Many successful people weren't the smartest in their class, but they were the most persistent and strategic. The process of rewriting your stories requires 3 steps. First, awareness. You need to become conscious of the narratives you're currently telling yourself. Most of our limiting stories operate below the level of conscious awareness. They're like background music that influences our mood without us realizing it's playing. Second, examination. Once you're aware of a story, you need to examine its origins and accuracy. Where did this belief come from? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Is this story helping me create the life I want, or is it holding me back? Third, rewriting. This doesn't mean creating false or unrealistic stories. It means crafting narratives that are both truthful and empowering, that acknowledge challenges while emphasizing possibilities and strengths. Rebecca's transformation began when she rewrote her core story from, "I have to work twice as hard to get half as much," to, "I bring unique value to my organization, and I can showcase that value strategically." This new narrative led to different behaviors. She started focusing on high-impact projects rather than just staying busy. She began building relationships with key decision-makers rather than trying to please everyone. She learned to articulate her contributions clearly rather than assuming her hard work would speak for itself. 6 months later, Rebecca received the promotion she'd been seeking, but more importantly, she'd learned to see herself as someone whose contributions were inherently valuable, not someone who had to earn worth through struggle. The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality more than we realize. They influence what opportunities we notice, what risks we're willing to take, what goals we set, and how we interpret both success and failure. By becoming conscious of these narratives and learning to rewrite them, we can literally change the trajectory of our lives. Your current story about yourself isn't the truth. It's just one possible interpretation of your experiences. And if that story isn't serving you, if it's keeping you small or stuck or afraid, then it's time to become the author of a new and better story. The pen is in your hand. What will you write next? Chapter 5. The Neuroscience of Transformation. Understanding the stories we tell ourselves is crucial, but knowledge alone isn't enough to create lasting change. To truly eliminate self-doubt and rewire our thoughts, we need to understand how the brain actually changes and what we can do to accelerate that process. For most of human history, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially fixed. The prevailing wisdom was that we were born with a certain number of brain cells, and that number only decreased over time. If you had limiting beliefs or destructive patterns, you were essentially stuck with them. This belief was not only wrong, it was devastatingly limiting for millions of people who accepted it as truth. Everything changed in the 1990s with the discovery of neuroplasticity. Scientists learned that the brain is constantly rewiring itself throughout our entire lives. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every action you take literally changes the physical structure of your brain. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of human potential and gave us a scientific foundation for transformation that had never existed before. Let me explain how this works in practical terms. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, and these neurons communicate with each other through connections called synapses. When you have a thought or perform an action, electrical signals travel along specific neural pathways. The more frequently you use a particular pathway, the stronger and more efficient it becomes. Think of it like walking through a forest. The first time you walk from point A to point B, you have to push through thick underbrush, step over fallen logs, and navigate around obstacles. It's slow and difficult, but if you walk that same path every day for a month, something remarkable happens. The repeated foot traffic creates a clear trail. The underbrush gets trampled down, the obstacles get cleared away, and what was once a difficult journey becomes an easy walk. Your neural pathways work the same way. The thoughts and behaviors you repeat most often become the mental equivalent of superhighways, while the ones you rarely use become overgrown and difficult to access. This is why self-doubt can feel so automatic and overwhelming. If you've been thinking self-critical thoughts for years or decades, you've literally built superhighways in your brain that make those thoughts the path of least resistance. When faced with a challenge or opportunity, your brain automatically defaults to the most well-traveled route, which might be something like, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll probably fail," or "People like me don't succeed at things like this." But here's the exciting part. You can build new pathways. Every time you choose a different thought or behavior, you're literally rewiring your brain. The process isn't instant, but it's absolutely possible. And understanding how it works can help you accelerate your transformation. The key principle is what neuroscientists call neurons that fire together, wire together. When you repeatedly pair a new thought with a strong emotion or a specific action, you create new neural connections. Over time, these connections become stronger and more automatic. Let me share a case study that illustrates this principle beautifully. I worked with a client named David who had a severe fear of public speaking. This fear wasn't just nervousness, it was a full-blown phobia that had limited his career advancement for over a decade. David was brilliant at his job as a financial analyst, but every time he was asked to present his findings to senior management, he would either decline the opportunity or perform so poorly that his insights were dismissed. When we started working together, David's brain had a well-established neural pathway that connected speaking in public with danger and humiliation. This pathway had been reinforced by a traumatic experience in high school when he forgot his lines during a school play and was laughed at by his classmates. For 20 years, every time David even thought about public speaking, his brain would activate this pathway, flooding his system with stress hormones and triggering his fight-or-flight response. Traditional advice like, just imagine the audience in their underwear, or practice more, wasn't helpful because it didn't address the underlying neural programming. Instead, we used a systematic approach based on neuroplasticity principles. First, we started with visualization exercises designed to create new neural pathways. David would spend 10 minutes each day imagining himself giving successful presentations. But we didn't just have him picture the event. We engaged all his senses and emotions. He would visualize the conference room, hear the sound of applause, feel the confidence in his posture, and most importantly, experience the emotions of pride and accomplishment. At first, these visualizations felt forced and artificial. David's brain kept trying to default to the old pathway of fear and anxiety. But we persisted, and gradually, the new pathway began to strengthen. The key was consistency and emotional intensity. The brain pays more attention to experiences that are emotionally charged, so we made sure David's visualizations were vivid and emotionally engaging. Second, we used a technique called progressive exposure to gradually build real-world experience with the new pathway. David started by recording himself giving presentations alone in his office. Then he presented to one trusted colleague, then to a small team. Each successful experience strengthened the new neural pathway while weakening the old one. Third, we incorporated physical practices that supported the new programming. David learned breathing techniques that activated his parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the stress response. He practiced power poses that research has shown can actually change hormone levels and increase confidence. He developed pre-presentation rituals that anchored him in the new confident state. The transformation took about 6 months, but the results were remarkable. David not only overcame his fear of public speaking, he became one of the most sought-after presenters in his company. His insights, which had always been valuable, were now being heard and implemented at the highest levels of the organization. But the most interesting part of David's story is what happened to other areas of his life. As his confidence in public speaking grew, he noticed improvements in his overall self-confidence. He started taking on leadership roles he would have avoided before. He began dating again after years of social isolation. He even started a side business that required him to pitch to potential investors. This ripple effect illustrates another important principle of neuroplasticity. When you strengthen neural pathways related to confidence and capability in one area, those pathways become available for use in other areas as well. The brain doesn't compartmentalize as much as we might think. Building confidence in public speaking helped David access confidence in other challenging situations. Understanding neuroplasticity also helps explain why some change techniques work better than others. Traditional willpower-based approaches often fail because they're trying to use the conscious mind to override unconscious programming. It's like trying to dam a river with your bare hands. The force of the established neural pathways is simply too strong. More effective approaches work with the brain's natural change mechanisms. They use repetition to build new pathways, emotion to make those pathways more memorable, and gradual progression to avoid triggering the brain's resistance to change. One of the most powerful tools for rewiring the brain is what I call pattern interruption. This involves consciously disrupting old neural pathways before they can complete their cycle. For example, if you notice yourself starting to think, "I'm not good enough," you can interrupt that pattern by immediately asking yourself, what evidence do I have that contradicts this thought? Or, what would I tell a good friend who is thinking this about themselves? The key is to catch the old pattern early, before it gains momentum. The longer you allow a negative thought pattern to run, the more it reinforces the existing neural pathway. But if you can interrupt it quickly and redirect your attention to a more empowering thought, you begin to weaken the old pathway while strengthening a new one. Another powerful technique is what neuroscientists call memory reconsolidation. This involves recalling a limiting belief or traumatic memory while in a resourceful state, which can actually change how that memory is stored in the brain. It's not about forgetting the past or pretending bad things didn't happen. It's about changing the meaning and emotional charge associated with those experiences. I worked with a client named Maria who had been told by a teacher in 3rd grade that she was not college material. This single comment had shaped her entire educational and career trajectory. She'd avoided challenging academic pursuits, settled for jobs below her capability, and constantly doubted her intelligence. During our work together, we used memory reconsolidation to change how this experience was stored in her brain. While Maria was in a confident, resourceful state, we revisited that childhood memory. But instead of experiencing it from the perspective of a vulnerable 8-year-old, she experienced it from the perspective of a capable adult who understood that the teacher's comment said more about the teacher's limitations than about Maria's potential. This process didn't erase the memory, but it changed its emotional impact. The memory went from being a source of shame and limitation to being a reminder of her resilience and determination to prove that teacher wrong. Maria went on to earn her college degree at age 45 and start a successful consulting business. The science of neuroplasticity gives us tremendous hope and practical tools for transformation. It tells us that no matter how long we've been stuck in limiting patterns, no matter how deeply ingrained our self-doubt might be, we have the power to literally rewire our brains for success and confidence. But this power comes with responsibility. Just as we can use neuroplasticity principles to create positive change, we can also inadvertently use them to reinforce negative patterns. Every time we indulge in self-critical thinking, every time we replay our failures and disappointments, every time we imagine worst-case scenarios, we're strengthening neural pathways that don't serve us. The good news is that once you understand how the process works, you can become much more intentional about which pathways you're strengthening. You can choose to be the architect of your own neural networks, consciously building the mental infrastructure that will support your goals and dreams. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending that challenges don't exist. It's about understanding that your brain is constantly changing based on what you focus on, and taking responsibility for directing that change in ways that serve your highest potential. The brain you have today is not the brain you're stuck with forever. Every day, every moment, you have the opportunity to think thoughts and take actions that move you closer to the person you want to become. The question is, what kind of brain are you building? Chapter 6, The Practice of Mental Mastery. Knowledge without application is merely entertainment. You can understand the neuroscience of change, recognize the stories that limit you, and grasp the principles of transformation. But none of that matters unless you develop a consistent practice that turns insights into lasting change. Mental mastery isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a daily practice you commit to. It's the difference between knowing that exercise is good for you and actually going to the gym every day. It's the difference between understanding that meditation reduces stress and actually sitting down to meditate when your mind is racing with anxiety. Over the years, I've worked with thousands of people who had profound insights about their limiting beliefs and self-doubt patterns. They would leave our sessions feeling inspired and motivated, convinced that their lives were about to change dramatically. But then, weeks later, they would return feeling frustrated and defeated because nothing had actually shifted in their day-to-day experience. The missing piece was practice. They had the knowledge, but they hadn't developed the daily habits and rituals that would embed that knowledge into their nervous system and make it automatic. Let me tell you about a client named Jennifer who perfectly illustrates this principle. Jennifer was a marketing executive who came to me because she was stuck in what she called the cycle of self-sabotage. Every time she was on the verge of a major breakthrough in her career, she would find ways to undermine herself. She would miss important deadlines, say the wrong thing in crucial meetings, or simply freeze up when opportunities presented themselves. During our initial sessions, Jennifer had remarkable insights about her patterns. She traced her self-sabotage back to childhood experiences with a highly critical father who never seemed satisfied with her achievements. She understood intellectually that she was unconsciously recreating those dynamics in her professional life. She could see clearly how her fear of success was actually a fear of her father's disapproval, even though he had passed away years earlier. But understanding the problem didn't solve it. Jennifer would leave our sessions feeling enlightened and empowered, but within days, she would find herself falling back into the same old patterns. The insights were real, but they weren't integrated into her daily experience. That's when we shifted our focus from understanding to practice. Instead of just talking about her patterns, we developed a comprehensive daily routine designed to rewire her neural pathways and create new automatic responses to challenging situations. Jennifer's practice consisted of 5 key elements, and I want to share these with you because they form the foundation of mental mastery for anyone serious about eliminating self-doubt. The first element is what I call morning mental programming. Jennifer would spend the first 20 minutes of each day consciously directing her mental state before the demands of the day could hijack her attention. This wasn't just positive thinking or affirmations. It was a structured process designed to activate the neural pathways that supported her goals and confidence. She would begin with 5 minutes of deep breathing to activate her parasympathetic nervous system and create a calm, receptive state. Then she would spend 10 minutes in visualization, but not the vague, wishful thinking kind of visualization that most people do. Jennifer's visualizations were specific, detailed, and emotionally engaging. She would imagine herself in challenging work situations, but instead of seeing herself freeze up or make mistakes, she would visualize herself responding with confidence and competence. She would see herself speaking up in meetings with clarity and conviction. She would imagine herself taking on new challenges with excitement rather than fear. She would visualize herself receiving recognition for her contribution and feeling genuinely worthy of that recognition. The key was to make these visualizations as real and vivid as possible. Jennifer would engage all her senses, imagining not just what she would see, but what she would hear, feel, and even smell in these successful scenarios. She would pay particular attention to the emotions she would experience, really feeling the confidence, pride, and satisfaction in her body. The final 5 minutes of her morning routine involved what we called identity affirmations. These weren't generic positive statements like, "I am successful." Instead, they were specific declarations about who she was becoming, based on evidence from her actual experiences. For example, "I am someone who speaks up for my ideas because I did that in yesterday's team meeting, and it led to a breakthrough solution." The second element of Jennifer's practice was pattern interruption throughout the day. We identified the specific thoughts and feelings that typically preceded her self-sabotaging behaviors. For Jennifer, the warning signs were thoughts like, "I don't belong here," or "they're going to figure out I'm not qualified," accompanied by physical sensations like tightness in her chest and shallow breathing. Whenever Jennifer noticed these warning signs, she would immediately implement a pattern interruption technique. She would take 3 deep breaths, remind herself of a recent success, and ask herself, what would the most confident version of myself do in this situation? This simple practice helped her catch the old patterns before they could gain momentum and redirect her energy toward more empowering responses. The third element was evening reflection and integration. Before going to bed each night, Jennifer would spend 10 minutes reviewing her day, but not in the self-critical way she used to. Instead, she would focus on 3 specific questions. What did I do well today? What did I learn today? How did I grow today? This practice served multiple purposes. It helped her notice and celebrate progress that she might otherwise overlook. It reinforced positive neural pathways by consciously acknowledging successful behaviors. And it helped her extract learning from challenging experiences rather than just beating herself up about them. The fourth element was weekly pattern analysis. Every Sunday, Jennifer would spend 30 minutes reviewing the previous week to identify patterns and trends in her thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. She would notice which situations triggered her old patterns and which strategies were most effective for managing them. This meta-awareness helped her become increasingly skilled at recognizing and redirecting limiting patterns before they could derail her progress. The fifth element was monthly vision reinforcement. Once a month, Jennifer would spend an hour reconnecting with her larger vision and goals. She would review her progress, celebrate her achievements, and adjust her practices based on what she was learning about herself. This helped her maintain motivation and ensure that her daily practices were aligned with her bigger picture objectives. The transformation in Jennifer's life was remarkable, but it didn't happen overnight. For the first few weeks, the practices felt forced and artificial. Her old patterns were so deeply ingrained that her brain kept trying to default to familiar territory. But Jennifer persisted, and gradually something shifted. After about 6 weeks of consistent practice, Jennifer noticed that her automatic responses to challenging situations were beginning to change. Instead of immediately thinking, "I can't do this," she would find herself thinking, "This is challenging, but I can figure it out." Instead of feeling overwhelmed by new opportunities, she started feeling excited about them. The real breakthrough came about 3 months into her practice. Jennifer was offered a promotion to a senior leadership role, the kind of opportunity that would have terrified her in the past. But instead of finding ways to sabotage herself, she found herself stepping into the role with confidence and competence. Her daily practices had literally rewired her brain to support success rather than sabotage it. But Jennifer's story illustrates an important point about mental mastery. It's not about perfection. Even after months of practice, Jennifer still occasionally experienced self-doubt and limiting thoughts. The difference was that these experiences no longer controlled her behavior. She had developed the skills and awareness to recognize them quickly and redirect her energy toward more empowering responses. This is what mental mastery really looks like. It's not about never having negative thoughts or challenging emotions. It's about developing the ability to work with your mind skillfully, to recognize limiting patterns quickly, and to have reliable tools for shifting your mental state when needed. The practices I've described with Jennifer can be adapted to fit anyone's lifestyle and preferences. The key is consistency rather than perfection. It's better to do a simple 5-minute practice every day than to do an elaborate hour-long practice once a week. The brain changes through repetition, not through intensity. Some people prefer to do their mental training in the morning, while others find evening practices more effective. Some people respond well to visualization, while others prefer journaling or movement-based practices. The specific techniques matter less than finding approaches that resonate with you and committing to them consistently. One of the most common mistakes people make when starting a mental mastery practice is trying to do too much too soon. They get excited about the possibilities and create elaborate routines that are impossible to maintain. Then, when they inevitably miss a few days, they feel like failures and abandon the practice altogether. I recommend starting small and building gradually. Begin with just 5 minutes a day of conscious mental training. It could be meditation, visualization, journaling, or simply taking a few minutes to set positive intentions for your day. Once that becomes automatic, you can add additional elements. The goal is to create what I call mental fitness, the same way you might develop physical fitness. Just as you wouldn't expect to run a marathon after a week of training, you shouldn't expect to completely eliminate self-doubt after a few days of mental practice. But just as consistent physical exercise gradually builds strength and endurance, consistent mental practice gradually builds confidence and resilience. Another crucial aspect of mental mastery is learning to work with resistance. Your brain is designed to resist change, even positive change, because change requires energy and creates uncertainty. When you start implementing new mental practices, you'll likely encounter internal resistance in the form of thoughts like, "This is silly," "I don't have time for this," or "This isn't working." This resistance is normal and actually a sign that you're challenging old patterns. The key is to expect it and not let it derail your practice. I tell my clients that resistance is like a muscle that gets stronger when you fight it and weaker when you acknowledge it without engaging with it. When you notice resistance arising, simply acknowledge it. "I notice I'm feeling resistant to this practice right now." Then gently redirect your attention back to the practice without making the resistance wrong or trying to force it away. Over time, the resistance will naturally diminish as your new practices become more familiar and automatic. Mental mastery also involves developing what I call emotional agility, the ability to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. Self-doubt, fear, anxiety, and frustration are natural human emotions that everyone experiences. The problem isn't having these emotions. The problem is when these emotions drive our decisions and behaviors in ways that don't serve us. Through consistent practice, you can learn to experience challenging emotions without being hijacked by them. You can feel afraid and still take action. You can experience self-doubt and still pursue your goals. You can feel frustrated and still maintain your composure. This emotional agility is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, both personally and professionally. The practice of mental mastery is ultimately about taking responsibility for your inner life. Most people live at the mercy of their thoughts and emotions, reacting automatically to whatever arises in their consciousness. Mental mastery means becoming the conscious director of your mental and emotional experience, choosing your responses rather than simply reacting to circumstances. This doesn't mean controlling every thought or emotion, which is impossible and unhealthy. It means developing the awareness and skills to work with your mind skillfully, to recognize when you're caught in limiting patterns, and to have reliable tools for shifting your state when needed. The journey of mental mastery is lifelong. There's no point at which you graduate and no longer need to practice. But that's actually part of its beauty. Each day offers new opportunities to strengthen your mental fitness, to deepen your self-awareness, and to become more skillful at creating the inner conditions that support your highest potential. Your mind is your most powerful tool for creating the life you want. But like any tool, it requires skill and practice to use effectively. The question isn't whether you have the capacity for mental mastery. You absolutely do. The question is whether you're willing to commit to the daily practice that will develop that capacity. The time you invest in mental mastery will pay dividends in every area of your life. It will improve your relationships, enhance your performance, increase your resilience, and most importantly, give you the confidence and clarity to pursue your biggest dreams without being held back by self-doubt. The practice begins now, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you have more time or feel more motivated. Now, what one small step can you take today to begin developing your mental mastery? Your future self is counting on you to take that step. Your journey forward, breaking free forever. As we reach the end of our journey together, I want you to take a moment to reflect on how far you've already come. Simply by listening to this audiobook, by opening your mind to new possibilities, by questioning the limiting beliefs that may have held you back for years, you've already begun the process of transformation. You now understand that self-doubt isn't a character flaw or a permanent condition. It's simply outdated programming that was installed during your most vulnerable years, when you didn't have the critical thinking skills to question what you were learning about yourself and your capability. You've learned that the stories you tell yourself shape your reality more than any external circumstance. You understand that your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thoughts, emotions, and actions. You know that with consistent practice, you can literally rebuild your neural pathways to support confidence instead of doubt, possibility instead of limitation, and growth instead of stagnation. But knowledge alone isn't enough. The real transformation happens when you take what you've learned and apply it consistently in your daily life. This is where many people stumble. They get inspired by new ideas, but they don't develop the discipline to turn those ideas into habits. I don't want that to happen to you. So let me leave you with a clear roadmap for moving forward, a practical plan that will help you eliminate self-doubt permanently and create the life you truly deserve. First, commit to a daily practice. It doesn't have to be elaborate or time-consuming. Start with just 5 minutes each morning. Use that time to consciously direct your mental state before the world demands your attention. Breathe deeply, visualize yourself succeeding in the day ahead, and set positive intentions for how you want to show up. Second, become a pattern detective. Throughout your day, notice when self-doubt arises. What triggers it? What thoughts accompany it? What physical sensations do you experience? The more aware you become of your patterns, the more power you have to change them. Third, develop your pattern interruption skills. When you catch yourself in a cycle of self-doubt, don't just accept it as truth. Question it. Ask yourself, is this thought helping me or hurting me? What evidence contradicts this limiting belief? What would I tell a good friend who was thinking this about themselves? Fourth, surround yourself with positive influences. Remember that environment trumps willpower. Choose your inputs carefully. Limit your exposure to negative media and toxic people. Seek out content, conversations, and relationships that support your growth. and remind you of your potential. Fifth, celebrate your progress. Too often, we focus on how far we still have to go, instead of acknowledging how far we've come. Make it a habit to notice and celebrate your wins, no matter how small they might seem. Every time you choose an empowering thought over a limiting one, every time you take action despite feeling afraid, every time you speak up for yourself or pursue an opportunity, you're rewiring your brain for success. Sixth, be patient with yourself. Transformation is a process, not an event. You didn't develop your limiting beliefs overnight, and you won't eliminate them overnight either. There will be setbacks and challenges along the way. That's normal and expected. What matters is that you keep moving forward, that you treat each setback as a learning opportunity rather than evidence that change is impossible. Seventh, get support when you need it. You don't have to do this alone. Whether it's working with a coach, joining a support group, or simply sharing your journey with trusted friends and family members, having support makes the process easier and more sustainable. Remember, you are not broken. You are not flawed. You are not destined to remain stuck in patterns of self-doubt and limitation. You are a capable, worthy, valuable human being with unlimited potential. The only thing standing between you and the life you want is the willingness to challenge the thoughts and beliefs that no longer serve you. The world needs what you have to offer. Your unique talents, perspectives, and contributions matter. But you can't share your gifts fully if you're held back by self-doubt. You can't make the impact you're capable of making if you're playing small to avoid the risk of failure or judgment. It's time to step into your power. It's time to trust yourself. It's time to pursue your dreams with the confidence and determination they deserve. You have everything you need within you right now. You always have. The prison of self-doubt that has confined you exists only in your mind. The walls are made of thoughts and beliefs that can be changed. The door has always been unlocked. You just needed to realize that you hold the key. That key is in your hand right now. The question is, are you ready to use it? Your journey to eliminate self-doubt and break free from limiting beliefs starts today. Not someday, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Today, take that first step. Your future self is waiting for you on the other side of your fear. And trust me, the view from there is absolutely magnificent. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your transformation journey. Now go out there and show the world what you're truly capable of. I believe in you, and more importantly, you're learning to believe in yourself. The best is yet to come.